Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. Today, I'm coming from you, or to you live from Cape Town. Unfortunately, I don't know what the day looks like because I haven't been out of my room this morning, but warm welcome. And today we are doing a political update and talking about a whole host of issues with my good friend, David Ansara. And I'm really happy to have David back today. And I think it's such a fantastic follow-up from last week when we had Dawie Rood on. So really excited for this. I'm thankful for everybody joining us this morning. And without any further ado, let's get the show started. Here we go.
This is Propulsion, the podcast for forward-thinking and driven and ambitious financial planning professionals. It is the catalyst to the exponential growth of your financial planning practice, your business, or your franchise. This is where professionals come in order to learn about the latest technology, to learn about best practice when it comes to running and managing their business, as well as marketing, sales, relationship building, the best and most valuable interviews with local and international guests, and a whole host of other things. Without any further ado, here is your host, Francois du Toit.
Mr. Ansara, welcome back to Propulsion Live.
Francois, it's great to be back. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And I first started chatting with you back in the virtual coffee with Francois days. So I've been trained to always have my cup of coffee with me. So I still haven't let go of that habit.
Fantastic. I must just tell you, like, you're giving me goosebumps now. I can't, like yesterday, I did a coffee here in the room when I woke up, and it's like never again. So I didn't have a coffee today.
You've become a coffee snob.
Yeah. It's like, I must say, sometimes I feel guilty for being a bit of a snob like that as well. But you know what? Standards, eh? We got to raise the bar. And like
life is too short for bad coffee.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know who David is with the Center for Risk Analysis at the moment. Not for very long anymore. I'll share with you what's happening. But David has been, when I got to know David back in 2018, he was the Chief Operating Officer for the Center for Risk Analysis. They do loads of things. I'll let David explain a little bit about what they do again. But it's been a phenomenal ride to get to know David. He's very well versed in the arena of politics, which I'm not. So that's why I get David on, because he really has a way of explaining things and things what they see. Because the Center for Risk Analysis obviously looks at risks and things that are coming, things that's happened, and what they think where things are going. So really a phenomenal role that they play. And but now David has been appointed as the Chief Executive for the Free Market Foundation from January 2023. So David, massive congratulations from us. I watched your introductory talk already, where you said like what your vision is and all of those good things. So really excited to talk about everything and the roles of all these sort of bodies in South Africa. But let me cut that short. Just once again, warm welcome to the show. And I really look forward to our chat today.
Yeah, me too, Francois. So as you say, I'm with the Center for Risk Analysis for now, and we focus a lot on the political environment, but also the policy space, because the policies are what politics gives expression to, and that impacts on our clients very much. So we spend a lot of time analyzing legislation, regulations, and looking at political trends to see how those might play out into the future. So we help our clients to understand where South Africa is at the moment, where it's coming from, and where it might be going in the future, to help you prepare your strategic position accordingly. So do a lot of scenario planning. We have our weekly risk alert, which comes out on a Monday morning first thing. So that frames for you the issues in the environment that you need to be focusing on most carefully and attentively. And then we produce a lot of reports. We have our daily YouTube channel, which I host, and that has been very popular as well. So yeah, we're a very busy bunch.
Yeah, absolutely. Like and then there's a newsletter you do every Saturday, usually. Sometimes they come out on a Sunday, I guess, when life gets busy, but usually, like, and I don't know if that was a personal thing. I mean, is that a personal thing you did? That's got nothing to do with that, but is that just David's thoughts on life?
Yeah, so I really enjoy writing, reflecting on my environment and broadening my lens. So I'm not just interested in what's happening in politics, and I think it's good to writing is an amazing tool for expression and for clarifying your thinking as well. So I find the more that I write, the easier my job becomes in terms of analyzing what is happening around me and just crystallizing my thinking.
What I wanted to ask is, if you think about, you're saying like writing is a good way to crystallize, but don't you also find that writing makes it so much easier to do stuff like the YouTube channel and to talk to people and to just have, if I think about how time has gone down, the amount of time that it takes me to prep for something, whether it's a talk, whether it's an episode of this, whatever, I found that when I wrote a lot, it made it easier to almost think on your feet. Did you also find that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, particularly if you're dealing with a complex problem or an issue in your life, you can kind of get stuck in a loop where you're constantly mulling over this thing. So getting the thoughts out of your head and onto the page gives you a bit of perspective. So I think that's very useful. But also, like you say, it has application across other mediums as well. So if you think of something like a YouTube video, it needs a structure, it needs conceptual consistency, it needs one particular hook or idea that it's trying to convey. So that I think is very useful. And so writing just helps you in so many spheres of your life, and it's what we do a lot of at a think tank like the Risk Analysis. Also, my new organization, the Free Market Foundation, I'm going to be doing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Right, so let's get into the conversation, David, because now I can talk for the entire episode just about this stuff, because it's a very interesting thing actually for me. But anyway, so let's talk about the upcoming ANC elective conference, right? So it's this time of the year. I know usually December, and I'm keen to know, are there any things that you have identified and emerging policies and things that you think are putting things at risk, or things that they want to change that may not be what we want? I don't know. Is there anything like that? Or are there any changes that you think is upcoming or coming up that might be even good, that we can be excited about? Like, where are we with this?
Well, I would say that probably a good way to assess this conference is that it's going to be continuity and change. So look, we at the CRA are often contrarians, and we go against the grain many times. But I think that it is safe to say that Mr. Ramaphosa will hold on to the position of president. This is an elective conference, so a number of the National Executive Committee, it's about 100 or so people, they're up for election. Then also the top six, the so-called top six, so the president, the deputy president, secretary general, deputy secretary general, treasurer, etc. But I think the spot to be looking out for is that deputy presidency, and one of the front runners there is Paul Mashatile, and he has actually been occupying a number of different portfolios. He's the acting secretary general, he's the current treasurer, and also deputy secretary general as well, because Jesse Duarte passed away. And Ace Magashule, who was the secretary general, was suspended from that post for allegations of corruption and so on. So, I think he is personally somebody very interesting to watch. He's played his cards quite close to his chest, and seems to have built up a bit of a broad coalition of support there. So I would say he's somebody to watch. But, I wouldn't expect any great surprises if you kind of look at the spread of delegates across different provinces. But, by their very nature, surprises take you by surprise. And so the estimates in terms of provincial support, those aren't guaranteed necessarily. So if you had to look at the number of delegates from a province like Limpopo and Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal, which are the largest delegations, the delegates actually vote in their individual capacity. So they're not voting necessarily as a bloc. So there could be opportunities for kind of swaying individuals. But obviously that would have to take place on quite a large scale in order for loyalties to shift. You can also have delegates nominated from the floor at the last minute. So that requires, I think, about 25% worth of support in order for that to be valid. So we could see at the last minute somebody come in and be nominated. And we have had surprises at previous conferences before. So in 2017, the Nasrec Elective Conference, we had David Mabuza, who became deputy president. His Mpumalanga voting bloc was actually not committed. So those votes were up for grabs, and at the last minute, they swung towards President Ramaphosa, and Mr. Ramaphosa won by a very faint margin. So there are going to be, like last time in 2017, about 4,100 voting delegates. And yeah, I think last time Mr. Ramaphosa won by a margin of about 135 delegates, something like that. So it was a wafer-thin margin. But what's very interesting is, unlike last time, it was a kind of wave of popular support, Mr. Ramaphosa was able to build this broad coalition. Now he's in a considerably weaker position. So even though the party is still in support of him, his authority has diminished, his standing has been tainted by the Phala scandal, where all of that foreign currency was found in his furniture, which raised a lot of uncomfortable questions for the president. So even if he is able to escape legal liability, the perception that he once had this public image of being somewhat detached from the grubby internal politics of the ANC, now is kind of just maybe seen as, guilty of kind of committing the same kinds of malfeasance. So that's a problem. And in many respects, the lack of a strong challenger, I think, also suggests that perhaps the leadership of the party is seen as a bit of a poisoned chalice, that the ANC itself is much weaker. And to be the one who is now leading the party, you could be associated with that decline. So if we think about what's happened since 2017, it's been a pretty eventful few years, right? So Mr. Ramaphosa was voted in as president of the country in 2018, May 2019. And, wave of so-called Ramaphoria and popular support, very high expectations. We at the CRA were always somewhat skeptical of the so-called reform agenda, and we were vindicated in that, because a lot of the policies that then came through was either more of the same, the status quo, or even more radical policies in some respects, if you think of expropriation without compensation, national health insurance, etc. So, now he's considerably weaker. We've had in the intervening years those major riots. There was the COVID pandemic. There has been this very poor showing of the ANC at the local government elections last year. So, a lot of headwinds facing the party, and Mr. Ramaphosa is going to have to deal with that. Doesn't really seem to have an appetite for the kind of the big fundamental changes and reforms that are needed to unlock growth in South Africa.
And just something that I'm thinking at the moment, David, is, you think when he came in, as you said, it was very popular. And I think the whole of South Africa was hopeful to say, that now things will change. Here's a guy that, is almost above reproach. And there's it's going to be good. And, and there were people that thought he handled the COVID thing well. And there's people that think he didn't. And then there's all these little things, as you say, that now crops up and saying, it's not helping. I'm trying to remember the year. It's probably been nobody can luckily fact check me, but I know I was at a session. I was about 2009, 2010, 2011, somewhere there. Justice Malala was speaking at this conference that I was at. And he said at the time that by 2024, the ANC will no longer be in control. So they will never be no longer be the ruling party. We're 2024. It's 2 years from now, right? and there's a lot of people saying the same thing. Now, do you believe that that's going to happen? Number one. And then number two is this whole thing around being able to form coalitions. what do we want to happen? Do you want the ANC to go out of, not be the ruling party, or is it better the devil you know than the one you don't? Like, I don't know. Do you have a view on that?
Well, so I think if we look at the electoral arithmetic in the last election in 2019, the ANC got 57.5%. So for them to lose their majority, they're going to have to go down by at least 8%. The most they've ever gone down by was about 4.5% between elections. So that's going to be a pretty big downward leap. But look, in the last local government elections, they got 46%. If you had to add up all of the municipalities that were contested, that's what that aggregate number would be. There is typically a bit of a differential between local government performance and national and provincial. But nevertheless, they are seen as a party on decline. And it's very difficult to kind of change that narrative and arrest that decline. So there are some pretty big headwinds facing the party, right? So the one is an internal financial problem. Cash flow is very difficult, because of campaign and party financing laws. There's now the requirement for transparency. A lot of companies that were previously donors are now, they've had their fingers burned because of all the problems with corruption, and they're a bit hesitant to support the party. And, that also reflects the macroeconomic conditions as well. So in the run-up to the local government elections, they weren't able to pay their staff in the ANC. So the ability to run big campaigns and, hire buses and sound systems and all of those things that make a campaign work, it's going to be quite difficult, right? The other headwind is the changing demographic profile of South Africa. So a lot of ANC support still resides in the provinces in the rural hinterland of South Africa. So often when you look at some of these by-elections, you'll see that in the rural areas, the ANC is still getting 60, sometimes 70%, depending on where you are, of course. So they're very much reliant on rural constituents. But South Africa is actually a rapidly urbanizing society. A lot of people, because of the lack of economic opportunity in the rural areas, are leaving to the cities to go and pursue better economic opportunities for themselves, even though that might mean you live in squalor in a squatter camp. It's still better than scratching around on a barren piece of dirt in the countryside. So when you arrive in the city, then you get exposed to different political organizations and ideas, and that makes you much more open and predisposed to voting for the opposition. And Gauteng is essentially an urban province, and I think that's going to be a key battleground in the next election. We're very likely to see Gauteng as a province being lost by the ANC. I think what's happened in Joburg and Tshwane, that's, I think, a leading indicator for what we're going to see in Gauteng. So there are a few scenarios for the ANC at the national level. So the one is that they just squeak by with just barely more than 50%, and they hold on to power. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be able to achieve all of the things they want to achieve at the legislative level. The other is that they just go below 50% and they manage to persuade a small party, like a one-seat party like Al Jamar or someone like that. The Good Party, Patricia de Lille, she's already in the cabinet, so I'm sure she could be persuaded to join the ANC. So, that would just get them over the line. It would be very interesting if the ANC gets below, say, 46 or 45%, and they're not able to get enough of the smaller parties to join them. Then you might see them going towards the EFF, for example, which would be a real downside scenario for South Africa. I don't think I have to describe what that would mean, but it would mean more socialist policies, a real risk to property rights. The EFF would be pushing for a kind of nationalization of key industries, which is a big part of their agenda. So I think that would be a real downside risk for South Africa. There's another coalition scenario, which is that in order to avert this, the ANC might go to the DA and say, hey, can you help us to form a majority, almost like a kind of a grand coalition, like what we saw in Germany, for example, between the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats. So really, I would say that everything is on the table. We don't have a crystal ball at the CRA. We do scenarios to help us think about different eventualities. We're not going to be doing forecasts or predictions like Mr. Malala. But because, the problem with forecasts is that it weds you to one particular view of the future. But I think it is safe to say that the ANC is on decline, and what the future could look like, maybe not necessarily in 2024, but throughout the 2020s, is that we actually see the ANC becoming more of a normal party, maybe sitting at around 40, 30% or so. And a coalition future, I think, is guaranteed at some point in South Africa, just because of the nature of our political system. Our proportional representation system means that parties and different interests tend to disaggregate and coalesce around these different ideas or groupings. So we're definitely looking at a coalition future, if not at the national level, then very much so at the provincial level, and definitely into the future.
Cool. Then, David, I want to talk about your new role, because there's a lot of intertwined, sort of things, I think, that the Free Market Foundation, that you want to drive and your vision for that. So first off, what is the Free Market Foundation that you are now becoming the chief executive of from, I think it's the 1st of January next year?
Yeah, that's correct. 1 January, I'll be starting. Well, 3rd of January, which is the first working day of the year. But the Free Market Foundation is a think tank, so it engages in policy advocacy. It's been around for nearly half a century, 47 years. It was founded 47 years ago. And it essentially promotes economic liberalism. So the classical liberal idea of free markets, free exchange. So individuals who are empowered, sovereign individuals who are free to exercise their economic agency by freely trading with one another, having their assets and their incomes protected. And part of that is around minimal government. So reducing the levels of government interference. So minimal government means very light touch regulation, means that essentially what you're trying to achieve is creating conditions for people to come up with business ideas, products, services, and let the market determine through that process of price discovery and supply and demand, rather than the state determining what should be the objective of the economy. And actually, when the state gets involved, we tend to have a lot of perverse incentives, a lot of over-regulation that constrains commercial activity, and a lot of distortions of those natural market signals. So that's broadly our agenda. Big part of that is property rights. So you need to know that your assets are going to be safe, that you have security of tenure, that your land or your factory or your incorporeal assets, your kind of intangible assets like your pension fund, for example, that those are protected by law. And big part of that as well is the rule of law. So that the rule of law is an idea that people, regardless of their power or position in society, must abide by the same laws as everyone else. So whether you're the president in the union buildings or the lady who sweeps the floor of the union buildings, you have the same rights, you have the same obligations and duties. So that kind of constitutional framework of rights protects everyone in society. So the Free Market Foundation has the Rule of Law Project. So our chairman, Rex van Schalkwyk, he is a former judge. He chairs that group, the Rule of Law Board. And so we act as a watchdog as well to make sure that the rule of law is being abided by, that there are no special exceptions or exemptions for those who have more power or wealth than other people. So yeah, those are some of the the kind of core principles, I mentioned property rights. And so we're not just an abstract think tank that is, debating the philosophy of property rights. We put it into practice. So the FMF has facilitated through its Kai Alam project the transfer of nearly 10,000 title deeds to the poor and disadvantaged. So many poor people, mostly Black South Africans, they would live in a home, and maybe they've been in that home for many generations, but they don't actually have legal title, legal right saying that this is my home that I lawfully own. So part of that, what we do is we help to facilitate an application to the deeds office through the municipality, and we make sure that those individuals get those legal documents. And so it's almost like a CSI initiative. That's a big part of the work that we do. So that gives expression to our idea around the importance of property rights.
Yeah. And I see Neil is asking quite an interesting question, saying that, does government listen to the FMF? Like what sway do you have and what input? And is there like some examples or things maybe that you can share about things that have actually originated from there and that has had an impact on how things work at the moment, or things that you've changed?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, look, often government doesn't listen because it has a very different set of ideas and principles that govern its behavior, right? So I think that this is something that I raised in my speech that you mentioned, which I can share the link with you if you like. But essentially what we're dealing with here is a contestation of ideas. And I see the FMF as a participant in the battle of ideas. And that means that we're going to advance policies or ideas that are not necessarily going to be implemented by the government. We want to put pressure on them to do so. So if you think of, a big part of our agenda is privatization. We feel that private organizations are often better at running complex organizations. They respond to market dynamics much more effectively. So if you think of South African Airways, that was an entity that was just sucking up billions and billions worth of rands of taxpayer money. But it all kind of got squandered and misappropriated. But eventually, when the entity had almost completely collapsed, then it was kind of unbundled and privatized. And the same with liberalization of the energy framework in South Africa. After years of rolling blackouts and electricity crises, finally it was acknowledged, okay, well, now we need to introduce private energy supply through IPPs, independent power producers, and we'll limit that, the government says, to 100 megawatts. And then when the crisis continues, then it's like, okay, well, we'll lift the cap on the private generation. So these two examples illustrate that there's a fundamental reluctance to embrace market economics from the government, but only when there is a severe crisis will they eventually concede. But it's not a wholehearted embrace of markets. It's like a reluctant concession to privatization. So part of how we see our role is creating that pressure, eloquently describing what the potential policy alternatives could be, and trying to push society towards embracing those ideas. And politicians respond to social changes. We often think of politicians being the leaders and them pioneering the social changes, but actually often they're responding to social change. So we see our role as influencing the marketplace of ideas, creating sympathy towards private enterprise. But also part of it is pressure, right? So litigation is one tool that you can have in your arsenal. So you can take the government to court, which we, for example, we believe very much in the rights of street traders. And often these street traders are harassed or intimidated by local metro cops or officials. And so what we did is we took the government to court during an episode where a lot of these traders were were being forced to off of the sidewalks and so on, and we actually won some concessions there. So when it comes to, for example, expropriation without compensation, we see that EWC bill that's coming through, the expropriation bill, when that gets passed, that could be something that we might seek to challenge in the court of law. And I'm sure many other civil society organizations will be seeking to do the same.
Good stuff. And then there's a question from Kobus, which I'll get to at the end because it's a little bit unrelated. I think it relates more to our first conversation. Kobus, I'll get to that question now. But I mean, just maybe a bit of background on the FMF, David. How long have they been around? And also, I know this is about, if I listen to you, I get this idea that it's about, fighting for economic freedom. Now, there's another party that does that as well, but I think there's a like an opposite agenda here. Like it's not the same thing. It is. I think there's a massive difference in saying and doing. But I mean, like if you are fighting for economic freedom for everyone, and for having rights and owning things out. Right, that's yours, just maybe if you can comment on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so we are economic freedom fighters at the FMF, but very different to the economic freedom fighters who wear the red berets. So those guys, they want state ownership. They want to eliminate private ownership because they think that is exploitative, to use their terminology. But our belief is that by spreading power down and out and empowering individuals through private rights, individual rights, property rights, that is the path to true empowerment. That is how you create true prosperity. And part of that is limiting state power, limiting that concentration of power that tends to occur naturally by politicians. So, I think when we talk about the economic freedom fighters, the Red Berets, they fight economic freedom like firefighters fight fire. They're actually opposed to economic freedom. And so that is why we see ourselves almost as the antithesis of an organization like that.
Then I do want to ask you Kobus's question. Kobus is asking if you can advise on the future of independent politicians standing to become president of our country. Is that a possibility? So someone that does not come from the ANC, they an independent, yeah.
Well, firstly, I'm very jealous of Kobus down in Plettenberg Bay. I wish I could go and join him because I'd go for a run on the beach there. So look, our electoral system is mandated by the Constitution that we need to have a proportional representation system in general, the Constitution says. So there is an electoral amendment bill, which is very controversial, which is trying to give effect to a constitutional court judgment, which said that we do need to make allowance for individuals to be on the ballot. But you don't want to disrupt that proportionality, that basic principle. So this electoral bill is trying to do both of those things at once. And in my view, there are potential risks there because there are problems with the allocation of the seats. It's quite technical, but essentially what you could have is, say that you have somebody who's very popular, everybody loves him, someone like Francois, for example. And if you consider that on average about 40,000 votes go towards each parliamentary seat. So, if you think of the ANC or the DA or whatever party, however many MPs they have, you can roughly allocate that is equivalent of about 40,000 votes. So say if Francois gets 40,000 votes under this new framework, he would get his one seat in parliament. However, because Francois is so popular and he gets 400,000 votes, what happens to those other like 9 seats? they basically disappear because there's only one Francois. He can only take up one seat in Parliament. So those then get reallocated to the other parties. And the problem there is that what you could have is a party like the ANC getting less than 50% of the votes, but more than 50% of the seats. So that really disrupts the proportionality rule. So there is a huge contradiction in that electoral amendment bill, which nobody really seems to be able to work out. But the Constitutional Court has mandated that these changes must happen. So now we're in a race against time in the build up to 2024. And, the IEC, the Electoral Commission, will actually have to implement its new system well before the actual election date. They need to update their systems and all that stuff. So we're really running out of time. And I think that's going to be quite a Gordian knot to cut.
Yeah. David, any last thoughts on, I think one of the questions in my mind is what the FMF is doing and, what you stand for and what you're fighting for and all of that is the things that we want to see and hear. Absolutely. And I think maybe adding on to Neil's question around, does government listen? I guess the question then becomes, is this a path worth pursuing?
Well, definitely. I think it is, Francois. I think I would say that there are a lot of challenges in South Africa at the moment and a lot of very, very deep systemic problems, right? But I would say that if your response to that is passivity and inaction, then you're not going to improve those issues. And we really don't have much of a choice, to be honest. If you believe in this country, if you love this country, then, and if you value individual freedom, people's ability to make a better life for themselves, then you have to get involved. You have to get stuck in. And sometimes that means having some uncomfortable conversations about, well, is this government actually really serving our interests? Maybe I should speak out. One way to do it, if you don't feel that you're able to put your head above the parapet, is you can support organizations that do that, right? I mean, I see the FMF acting as a shield, right? So a shield that can protect you and your rights, but can also advance those controversial arguments that will attract retaliatory fire. But, you need to also support organizations like that, like the Free Market Foundation, like the Institute of Race Relations, like Sakeliga, the business group. These are organizations that are fighting for your rights, but they also need help. They need support as well. So if you care about those causes and maybe you feel like you yourself are not able to take those risks, then you should definitely lend financial support or other kinds of support to organizations like that. Yeah, there's a Austrian economist and philosopher named Friedrich Hayek, and he wrote in this book, The Road to Serfdom, that nothing makes conditions more unbearable than the knowledge that no effort of ours can change them. So it doesn't mean that you must be a sunny optimist and be part of the good news brigade and say, oh, no, everything's fine, when actually things are not fine. There's riots and electricity blackouts and everything. But this is part of the process of transition, of change. And, there's an opportunity to push for change in a positive direction. So we need to be realistic about the problems that the country is facing, but also have a sense of faith that our actions can lead to better outcomes.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much. We're out of time. I can't believe it. So thank you very much. We always do the best. Neil is saying he sincerely wishes you all the best at the FMF. Your work is invaluable. And thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your input. Thanks for being a big part of this show over the years, giving us these updates and your thoughts and shares and things. It's really valuable, and really wishing you all the best in your new role. And we'll definitely keep in contact and chat. I'm sure there will be things we can talk about still in the upcoming seasons. So just wishing you all the best, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Francois. And I also just want to say thank you so much for not only having me on the show, but just for creating this platform. I think you've done an amazing amount for the profession, and you've created a real community. And I think this is an example of how individuals actually can create communities of action, and not only just about sharing insight, but actually building. These are the building blocks of what we call society, and it's very, very important, the work that you're doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Good stuff. Have a good weekend. Thanks, David.
Cheers, Francois.
Alrighty, so we'll be back next week. I don't know yet. I don't have a guest. I'll probably be my own guest next week, but I will be broadcasting live from Blouberg, somewhere in Blouberg. And hopefully I'm going to be able to. I've always wanted to do like a live stream with a fantastic, amazing, making you jealous kind of background. I haven't done that yet, so I'm going to try my best for next week. But anyway, ladies and gents, thanks for being here. We'll be back next week. Same time, same place. Join us, please, and like this video, subscribe, share with others, and enjoy your weekend. Be blessed and prosper, and continue to raise that bar as high as you can. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening. Remember to check out the live show, PROpulsion Live, on YouTube every Friday at 7 a.m. South African time. You can find it at www.propulsion.co.za/live. That's propulsion.co.za/live. And please remember to subscribe, share with your colleagues, your friends, and anyone who may find value like you did in this podcast. Once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next episode.